So we got started in 2019. And my co-founder and I, we were both in our undergrad program. So he was at St. Ed's and I was at UT at the time. And both of us had gotten into the consumer packaged goods space or the CPG space literally at the same time. And we were the only 20-something-year-olds we knew in the CPG space. So we actually ended up reconnecting pretty randomly on my 21st birthday. He was a bartender. So I stopped by the Roosevelt Room downtown and reconnected with him. And he had just broken into the CPG industry, Jordan, doing a sales role that was pivotal, to our growth, understanding the sales process, everything like that. And I had begun incubating a pretty shitty CPG idea myself. I was trying to start like a caffeinated mint back in the day. So I was networking with a ton of people doing the same song and dance I've shared with you before. But more than anything, like the foundational concept started because we just did not see nearly enough cultural representation for Hispanic beverages. So a lot of the beverages I grew up drinking, the Jarritos and cane sugar Coca-Cola, they're really nostalgic for Latinos, but they do not keep health in mind. And to add to that, my father's a statistician, so I've always been around health statistics my whole life, and he helped me dive into exactly what these SSBs or sugar sweetened beverages were doing to Latinos. Spoiler alert, they're killing 40,000 plus Mexicans per year just in Mexico, not to mention Latin America.
Is this diabetes, or is this direct correlation with
diabetes, cardiovascular disease? But pretty much these are obesity related diseases. And there's a lot of food science and nutrition science behind why it's so damaging. But to put it in perspective, whenever you have a population, a lower income population that's controlled by these big food and beverage companies that offer them these cheap, sweet cereals, drinks, etc., it ends up forming your palate in a quite literal sense. So the food and drinks you consume ages 0 to 5 are incredibly correlated with your health outcomes later in life. So you can take whatever sample you want of a low-income population, see the foods they consume, and over the course of many years, you'll see their BMIs and these other health parameters, they track accordingly with the shitty foods they ate from the ages of 0 to 5. So really, we saw a problem to solve, but not only that, a massive white space business opportunity.
Oh yeah. And there's nothing wrong with doing something good and making a ton of money along the way. I think a lot of people who don't understand entrepreneurship at all, they look at successful entrepreneurs, people who have made a lot of money, and they put a tag on them, right? That person's evil, that person is selfish, they take money from others. But the reality is you're solving a big problem, and you wouldn't be making money if you weren't solving a problem. So that brings us here today. We're both enjoying it right now, by the way. It's fucking gas.
Got the lime here.
No, I actually really like it. It's not one of those things where there are a lot of new products coming out in the beverage space, especially, but this has a very unique twist to it. Mm-hmm. And you have a great story. I actually think you're doing yourself a disservice by not being on social media more these days. I feel like a person in your position, not only is it a great product once again, but you have a story behind you, which I want to get into in a second. And you can really market that, right? My name's Victor. Like, I came from nothing. I'm building this awesome brand because I want to show that you can.
Yeah.
And that's also another thing I want to touch on later is there's a lot of, misconceptions about entrepreneurship.
Sure.
People think you need to come from money, have resources, have connections. It's definitely easier when you have those things. It's easier when your parents can point you in the right direction. But you came from nothing, right? And that, that means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to you, and hopefully to everybody else listening and watching. But what was that early life like? Were you always an entrepreneur, or was this you kind of fell into this?
I would say pretty much always, for the most part. So I guess for some more background, I'm a first generation Mexican immigrant. So my family moved to the States when I was 2. I'm the youngest of 3, and my dad was essentially like a a math savant. So we come from a very small town in Mexico, and this man taught himself calculus on the calculator when he was 12, graduated high school at 14. All this to say, he became a professor when he was like 16 years old, Monterey Tech. And then he got selected for a PhD program in Toronto. And this is like this little kid in rural Mexico, right? Brought us all over here. So we moved to the States. We moved to Waco, where my dad was teaching physics at Baylor, and then over to Corpus Christi at the age of 5. And I lived in Corpus Christi, Portland, Texas, a little suburb of there, ages 5 through 18. But the entrepreneurial formation certainly happened in Corpus Christi. And to be honest, I was always just abundantly curious and ambitious. And I also felt quite constrained, being in Portland, because it felt like the only avenues where I could express myself or innovate would be in petroleum and commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. And I knew I didn't align with that. So, I just remember being a young teen and a child having super ambitious dreams, absorbing as much business knowledge as I could. The first book my dad gifted me, I was 9. He gave me The Tao of Warren Buffett. And I was just consuming as much knowledge as possible. But really, I just remember being in my room, staring up at the ceiling, being like 12 years old, and just knowing I needed to get the hell out of there quickly. And Corpus Christi was not going to fulfill my appetite. So I trialed a couple small businesses in Portland. I actually launched one in Austin as well when I was 18, completely unrelated, but I've always
so you've been starting things here and there since early childhood.
For sure, and wanting to get involved. Like the cold email started when I was like 12 or 13, really, and I connected with people back then as well, like before Business Insider was what it is today. I connected with executives there, trying to figure out, how I could properly package myself when I'm reaching out to people I want to network with. And those were some pretty valuable skills that later went on to, I guess, add on to my public relations writing degree and working for other startups, and it just refined.
Yeah, and you're very good at we'll call it cold emailing, cold DMing, whatever. Yeah. We'll get into that in a second too. But what I'm wondering is, what gave you the confidence to do that at such a young age? There are so many kids, and even though this is different, but there are so many kids who are terrified of going up to girls, right? There's grown-ass men who can't muster the courage to cold email, can't muster the courage to face rejection. What do you think gave you the ability to do that at a young age?
Man, I think that is the juiciest question, because the true answer for myself was I experienced ego death at a really, really young age. And to add some color to that, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and I was always really curious. And I honestly developed a bit of existential terror at a super young age. I later went on to have to see a psychologist about it. But all this to say, these the weight of reaching out to someone paled in comparison to the existential dread I had. And at the point where I was wrapping my head around everything, I was like, what's the cost in reaching out to someone? What's the absolute worst that could happen if Patrick Terry or this girl I'm trying to reach out to tells me to, can I swear?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Okay, cool. What's the worst that could happen if they tell me to fuck off?
Yeah.
I'm just a little sad.
That's such a valuable lesson that isn't just applicable in entrepreneurship and in business, but in everything in life. And I think, that's why I brought up the idea of, getting rejected by girls, and that is terrifying to people just as much so as, reaching out to someone for a business connection. I think if you can get good at one of those things, it does translate well over.
Oh yeah.
Because you learn that lesson early on, I'm really not going to die if this person says no, but you're not going to get anything if you don't ask.
Yeah, exactly. And I just got in the habit of asking and refining my pitch as much as I could, and also having no expectations for the outcome. And I think the key to it is having zero expectations. I guess we'll talk about dating a bit too, but in your experience, I bet it's whenever you have no expectations with someone, the pressure's off. It's okay, so what? I shit the bed, but I don't care. Like, I'll shit the bed again tomorrow.
That's something I'm trying to figure out right now, dude.
Yeah.
That's something I'm trying to figure out right now. And
Yeah.
I think it's funny you bring that up. But you know, and I want to talk about balance with you later in the episode as well. I know that's something that it's some people think it's very important. Some people think it's not essential whatsoever. So I'm curious your perspective on that. But before we get there, I would love to know, and I think it'll also be extremely valuable for everyone listening and watching, how exactly, if you could dumb it down as much as possible, do you start a business? Like, give us like the 5-step plan for your company. Everything from the idea pops in the head to, you know, having a product that you can start to sell.
Yeah, I would say I would approach it so differently now than I would whenever we were starting Bawi or whenever I experimented with different businesses. But really, there's a couple check boxes you need to ensure. It's not just, you know, product market fit, which every entrepreneur will talk about. Like, is there room in the market for a culturally differentiated, sparkling beverage? Okay, cool. How big is that market? Because a lot of people, they'll get into the industry with, you know, a dream of an exit in this super niche category. But the truth is, like, if you and I made fidget spinners, that market cap is going to be like $100 million if we scale it successfully and spend the next 10 years of our lives trying to make it happen. So this concept of understanding your total addressable market, or your TAM, should certainly be a qualifier when you're starting a business. So ensuring you have an appropriate TAM to scale into that aligns with whatever dreams you have for your business, and also ensuring there's some room in the market for it. And there's some ways you can figure out, like, does this have product market fit? And one of the easiest ways is doing primary customer research. And primary research is legitimately going out and speaking to people. So whenever we were starting Bawi, we would go to Whole Foods on Lamar. We would see people with Rambler and Topo Chico in their shopping basket, and we would ask them, what do you find refreshing about this drink? Ask them a lot of questions around the product you're trying to develop to see if it has legs to stand on. And then you further your research by doing secondary market research, which is what you find on databases. Luckily, we got started in a UT entrepreneurship practicum, so we had access to a lot of best-in-class market research reports. And the last tier to that is you have to see if it sells. Whatever MVP you have, you got to take it to production. Like, same shit with Squid House. Like, you need the physical product in hand, see if it actually sells and fulfills a niche within the market. So we launched into farmers markets before we ever made the canned version to see if it had legs to stand on. And lo and behold, we sold out pretty much every weekend until COVID came around.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, that's fucking great. So congrats. I know this was a drink, maybe not designed, but, you know, somewhat of the inspiration for it was a healthier drink for the Latino community. I see white girls eating this shit up.
White girls mainly eat this shit up.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I'm curious. Do you know your demographics in terms of primary customer? Who's buying this right now?
We do. Our biggest cohort is 25 to 34-year-old females, slightly more affluent. Significant cohort is Latino in nature, but what we're doing is quite similar to what Siete Foods did. So one of the founders of Siete Foods is one of our investors as well. And one of the reasons why I respect them so much is they were able to create this like mass market Mexican-American behemoth. And the only way they were able to do that is if they appealed to a very large market. So I see a lot of CPG entrepreneurs from cultural backgrounds, Asian descent, Hispanic descent, etc. And whenever they're launching a product into market, they need to make sure it speaks to a broader set of consumers. So Siete Foods, their primary customer is not Hispanic. And that's not an edgy thing to say. It's the truth, right? Because we want Bawi to have a larger total addressable market. And if I were to just market it towards Hispanics, I would be doing the business a disservice, because ultimately we can help so many more Hispanic consumers out if we follow your traditional premium price, premium grocer approach, which does not have the highest percentage of Latinos within their shopper base yet.
Yeah.
But as you scale, you're able to get into more of the communities, more the Latino communities, the Hispanic communities, the traditional fiesta markets, Vallartas in California. But that is something that will happen with scale. And ideally, if we get acquired by one of the big boys one day, we're going to be in every single supermarket.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll speak to all the consumers too. And it'll be a win-win, for everyone, and will really make a difference within the Hispanic community. And even now, with Hispanics being our second largest, customer cohort, we're still making a difference. And we get messages all the time saying, this is the first time I've seen a healthy agua fresca on the market. I just got my diabetic dad off of traditional cane sugar Coca-Cola. So we're already making progress there. And really, we're just fast tracking it as much as possible to bring these like nostalgic Hispanic flavors to market. And the last thing I'll say about it, because I have to speak about this ad nauseum, is we're like nostalgic and familiar for Latinos, but we're culturally differentiated for non-Latinos. So most people, when they think of product differentiation within food and beverage, there's usually some functional axiom in there. So these people, adding ashwagandha and reishi to their beverages, that is certainly differentiation, functional, but ours is like cultural. And we benefit from Mexican food being the second most popular menu type in the United States, with agua fresca being the most ubiquitous non-alcoholic beverage within Latin America and the US that is yet to be commercialized.
Nice. No, I think that's fantastic. And I do really appreciate how you touched on product market fit, because there are so many young entrepreneurs, I would say mainly, who they want to get into this. They want to get into this field not because they love business, but because they love the idea of a specific business, like a gym bro wanting to start a gym, right? Or a guy who loves wine wanting to start a winery. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between being a personal trainer and owning a gym, being a winemaker and owning a winery. There's a difference between loving designing and making clothes and running a clothing brand, like in my case, right? And I get DMs and emails all the time, like, I want to start my own clothing brand too. My honest advice would be don't, because like it might be one of the easiest businesses to start in terms of what you need resources wise, but everybody has a fucking clothing brand. Like it's very hard to find product market fit, because it's really hard to innovate in the clothing space in terms of function. Right, all clothes do the same thing. You can make them look different, but there's enough clothing brands already.
And that reminds me too. One of our earliest investors, he started C4 pre-workout. So the parent company, Cellucor, behemoths, multi-billion-dollar company. And when we were getting started, he told my co-founder and I explicitly, like, boys, don't do this. He was like, I'll invest yes. Really? He said, don't do Bawi. Like it's going to be really difficult. The canned beverage industry is incredibly hard. Like you guys have to have such stellar positioning, product market fit, and market timing, which is an important crux to consider whenever you're launching something for sure, especially something food and beverage related. Mm-hmm. Timing totally matters, but I think it's okay to dissuade people within reason, or at least tell them like, these are the considerations you have to keep in mind. And that's exactly what Manish did for us. He was like, you're going to have to really watch X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's valuable. That's valuable insight from someone who knows what they're talking about. But I think it's good you push through, obviously. And, if you really are built for the world of entrepreneurship, getting a no or getting a don't do this type statement from someone, no matter how successful they are, how experienced they are, it doesn't stop you. Yeah. And you have to almost be relentless isn't even the right word. It's like you have to be like delusional in a way.
Locked in.
Like I will figure this out no matter what. So totally. That's awesome. But let's go back a little bit. When you're first starting the brand, you do your market research, you're in a good program to do that at the college you're at. But in terms of creating the product itself, are you mixing flavors in your room, or do you go right to the co-packer and you say, this is what I'm looking for? How does the product itself get created once you know, okay, there might be something here we can take a stab at?
Yeah. Yeah. So our MVP minimum viable product was literally a soda stream in our West Campus apartments. West Campus is an area west of UT Austin. But legitimately we were making like a lower sugar, lower juice agua fresca in a soda stream. And it is not as straightforward as putting like juice into carbonation equipment. There's so many factors that come into play, like different fruit fibers act as nucleation sites, where stuff will fizz up a lot more. So you have to watch your ZAMs, literally how sparkling the beverage is. But to your question, we got started with soda streams and an agua fresca recipe from my mom back in the day. And then luckily, Jordan, my co-founder, his uncle, he's like a home brewer, and he had a shit ton of like homebrew equipment. So we were able to figure out how to make something sparkling to sell it in farmers markets. So
Let's go.
yeah, we had our OG formulas. We launched in farmers markets with watermelon and pineapple. Watermelon's a bit more tricky to commercialize. It's why you don't see it in our core 3 SKUs, and it's why it's coming later on. But yeah, we had our farmers market formulation, but we needed to jump into a commercialized version of the product, something that's shelf stable at ambient temperature, which is very important within beverage. And thankfully, I had been working at a startup here in Austin at the time. I was essentially the founder's right-hand man, and I worked in growth and marketing. And within growth, I basically helped him fundraise. And I saw the systems he built. I upgraded all of them. I saw how he interacted with investors, the sorts of emails he sent, all of that jazz. And it was super instructive in I guess, forming my development. But to your point, I got connected with their food scientists. This was a coffee business, and their food scientist was the former head of beverage development at Starbucks for 2 decades. I was like, shit, it can't get much better than this from a formulator perspective. And she helped us set some guardrails around what can actually function within a can. And specifically, it's like, these are the pH ranges you want to target if you're using this pasteurization technology. Got real in the weeds, really quick. And from a formulation perspective, you could read our label and see it's super clean, but there's a lot that goes into manufacturing a beverage or a food product that is food safe.
Yeah, it's not as simple as making get some sparkling water and squeezing a lime in there, unfortunately. But that's what makes it special. That's what makes it last a long time too. But
Totally.
that's great. I think. What about this? Was completely bootstrapped, by the way, right?
Not
From day one, or how?
Not completely. So I would say somewhat bootstrapped. In the farmers markets, Jay and I contributed as much cash as we could as like some broke 19, 20-year-olds. And we
How much was that? How much do you need to start a business like this?
Food and beverage, it really depends on the category, but I think you can take a solid stab at trialing your concept for 5 to 10 grand. Depends what it is, right? But
I started Squid House with 9 grand.
Yeah, exactly. No, totally. And we actually received a grant from the founder of Kettle and Fire. He's one of our friends, Nick Mayers, and I think he wrote us like a $3,000 check. We tried to get him to invest. He was like, "No, just take it." We're like, okay, word. But yeah, we needed that cash to start in the farmers markets, and we were trying to self-fund the business through the farmers markets, but COVID literally cropped up. I think it was 5 or 6 months into the markets, and our ambition of self-funding the business quickly dissipated. And this coincided with me working at Golden Ratio, the coffee company, and learning how to fundraise. So it took about 9-10 months working at Golden Ratio until we landed our first major investor. So our first...
For that company or for Bawi?
For Bawi.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so you started with like $10,000, right?
Yeah.
How long after the original idea did you realize like, we can't do this alone? We're going to need some outside help?
Oh man, well, immediately, really, after the farmers markets, and especially going to a school like UT that has some very affluent pockets, affluent entrepreneurs. I remember us getting started with a few other brands at UT that were able to raise like over $1 million from their dad and their friends in like, yeah, no time whatsoever. And it took us several years to raise our first like 50K check, which, you know, that isn't a complaint whatsoever. We'll get into it later. I'm glad everything happened the way it did, but yeah, we knew we needed capital, and within beverage in particular, you need a bit more capital. So we were just piecemealing fundraisers really for several years, but it was that first raise we did. We raised 150 grand after the farmers markets, and that little round I did after leaving Golden Ratio, and that really allowed us to pursue Bawi full time, which, you know, I think if an entrepreneur can figure out how to pursue their project full time, whether it's fundraising or potentially saving up money, you know, working another job, I think it's like crucial. You figure out a way to
be
spend.
all in.
Yeah, you got to figure out a way to be all in. And there's a lot of founders who will raise money to pay themselves, and that's some sort of taboo. But the reality is, like, these founders that don't take salaries for 3 years, guess what their financial situation was before they started? It's way different, especially for entrepreneurs of color. And outside of Bawi, within my position at a nonprofit here in town, Naturally Austin, all I do is help minority entrepreneurs learn to fundraise and get out of this cold start. It's called a cold start because if you're not able to get your concept off the ground and you get frustrated with it, it's going to be dead on arrival. And that is how most businesses, you know, never reach inception. And unfortunately, that happens a lot for people that come from lower income backgrounds.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important you touched on that, because I think what might seem like a disadvantage to a lot of people, oh yeah, you know, I'm from a poor family, I don't have, because you didn't get any money from your friends or family. You couldn't, it wasn't available. And I think a lot of people will look at that as a negative and say, oh, well, that's not fair, right? But the reality is, and we talked about this on our run together, I actually think that's probably it's made you a better driver, right? Because you weren't given the good car from the start. You were given a shitty car.
Oh, yeah.
So you had to figure out how to cut the corners, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously you've been studying this. You've been getting better at this skill of raising for years. But I do genuinely feel like because you didn't have the ability to go ask your parents or your friends or an uncle or whoever for a check, you were forced into this, you know, position where you had to go figure it out. And I think that's really inspiring to a lot of other people out there who might feel like it's impossible. What do you have to say to anybody out there who, you know, whether they're of color or not, but someone from a underprivileged background that says, well, I can't be an entrepreneur, I can't start a business, it's impossible.
Yeah. There's absolutely a way to raise funds for your business. The threshold you have to hit in order to raise funds for your business is going to be much higher. So this term of due diligence essentially means like the amount of research or vetting usually done for an investment. So basically, if you don't have pedigree, if you don't have MBA from Harvard, or if you haven't worked for like another major company that could be a positive signal for an investor, you need to be fucking polished. And that onus, that burden is on you as an entrepreneur to do your research to the 11th degree, because you can't play ball the same way your contemporaries can. Different connections, different set of advantages. So you got to sharpen yourself a lot. And, you know, if you were to take like a group of 100,000 entrepreneurs with quote unquote advantages, maybe 1% or 1,000 of them are able to get started. You take that same group with disadvantages, maybe 100, but those hundreds are fucking killers.
Yeah.
Like they're absolute killers.
I'd like to challenge that perspective a little bit, because I think in today's day and age, people love a good story. Once again, touching back to why I think you should be taking advantage of yours. If a rich white kid from Connecticut is talking about how he started this, you know, drink company, not that many people would be interested, in my opinion,
For sure.
being on social media myself, having built a platform. But I think someone who does come from a much harder background, someone who has a much better origin story,
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity for you to have, a lot of success these days.
sure.
And I think if that is you and you put your story online, you say, hey, like, this is what I'm doing. I don't have the money I'm looking to raise. Social media is amazing and you can
For
find a lot of
sure.
success.
Yeah, man. And to your point, too, using those disadvantages to your advantage is the only way to succeed. So we'll get into the cold emails in a bit, but legitimately, like, a ton of my subject lines were just like first generation Mexican immigrant, UT Austin grad, looking for advice. So for those like underrepresented entrepreneurs, use whatever you can to your advantage. And this is I guess this is an open secret among founders of colors. Like I mentor quite a few founders. There's two that are coming to mind in particular. There's a female founder named Danny Wong that started a dried mango business. She's based out of Mexico City. Really cool. She was a telenovela actress and everything. And then there's another one out of New York. She's a female Asian founder as well. And I advise both of them on fundraising. And what you just said is exactly what I tell them. You have to figure out how to package yourself and sell yourself to investors. I'm obviously dog shit at doing it on social media, but I can do it interpersonally really well. And I definitely think I need to hop on social media a bit more and share because it does resonate with people, obviously. At least interpersonally, I just got to figure out a way to package it.
Yeah. Well, dude, I'm happy to help you. I mean, I've been asking you for advice on raising because that's something I want to do eventually.
Sure.
So I'm happy to try and return the favor.
Yeah, please.
But it's been unreal, the benefits of social media, in my experience, at least.
Totally.
Everything from obviously, a whole new sales channel. But opportunity, like we found our current new manufacturer in Mexico through a connection on social media. Have a lot of people offering money, both big players and everyday people through social. I made a video. Was it this morning or yesterday? I posted a video it might have been this morning. Someone was saying like, how can I buy shares in Squid Haws? Wow. And I was like, eventually I want to do some sort of third-party platform. I forget it's not crowdfunding. There's another term for it. But essentially like you kind of like reserve a piece of your company for them. That way, when you do your first round, they're bought in at the same price and people can invest as little as $50.
Wow.
Like a micro share, right? But I think with social media, like you can have a lot of success with it. So happy to help you out, man.
Yeah.
But on the note of raising, you're a wizard at this. And I remember there's one thing you said to me specifically on our run. You said when you were reaching out to people, you didn't say, hey, I have a great opportunity for you. You said, do you know anyone that would be interested in this opportunity?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which I think is so simple, but so effective and smart, at least it seems.
No, totally. I think it's a good unlock. I remember we were talking about, so whenever you're chatting to an investor and you want them to invest, it is a difficult sell for, an untested founder to overtly ask, like, will you invest in my business? If there is interest in investing in your business, if you wow this investor, they will let you know. And a good way to position that, which it sounds so like granular and nuanced, but it's super fucking easy to deliver, is, do you know anyone who may be interested in investing? And if that's them, they'll tell you. And that's exactly what happened with our first investors. Like with pretty much, all of them until we ended up raising the most recent round. It's been very similar conversations. And the people that I really wanted to join the Bawi team, the cap table, become investors, I did ask them directly. But the way you position it is also different, because there's some people that could make like an outsized contribution to your business. So if the head of LVMH was like Squid House looks really cool, you are probably going to try to figure out a way to get them invested.
I don't even care about the money at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a piece.
100%. Yeah.
Now you're going to want to blow it up too.
For sure. And that's why you're a lot more direct with some of those investors too. Like with Veronica Garza, I told her overtly from Siete Foods, one of the co-founders of Siete Foods, I told her overtly, your involvement is going to mean so much to us. I would really love to have you, on board as part of my mentor, something along those lines. And they're very candid and honest conversations where it's just like your involvement would mean like the world to me. Yeah.
So it's beyond just give me your money and I'll make you rich. It's like you as your individual character means a lot to us. I think that's really valuable. And a lot of people probably skip over that. Sure. I think had I not just heard that, I might honestly have skipped over that. Curious if you have any direct tips or pieces of advice I could steal from you.
Oh, totally.
On this journey myself.
Yeah. On cold emailing or
cold emailing, reaching out to someone who I have zero connection with whatsoever. And then my next question would also be like, how do I frame it in a certain way to capture this person's attention?
Yes. I love this.
Not do you want to be a part of this opportunity, but it's passing and you're about to miss out, something like that.
Yeah. So more so like getting the introduction or closing someone?
Closing. I can get the intros.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Closing someone is definitely a balance. And I'll say for Patrick Terry was our first investor from Pete Terry's Burger Stand. And
the local chain?
Yeah.
Oh, no way. That's sick.
Yeah, he was the burger man, made it happen for us.
Let's go.
Really. And I was probably over a dozen follow-ups deep with him before he hopped on a call with us and committed to invest. And I have very similar, stories with plenty of different investors too, where it's just like, I have to consistently follow up and push these guys down the funnel in a very similar sales capacity. So how any business development rep would approach bringing someone down the funnel, fundraising is a very similar arc. It's like a sales strategy entirely. So if you want to get someone to close quickly-ish or promptly, make sure all of your follow-ups are value-adding follow-ups. It shows that you respect the person on the other side of the table, and to add context to that.
Not just saying, what do you think?
Exactly.
Hey, never heard back from you.
Exactly. Just circling back, like, don't send those emails. Point blank. Whenever you follow up with anyone, you wait until you have fodder to follow up with. Even if it's minute, you do the best you can. So whenever I was following up with Patrick Terry, it was like, we just got our can designs back. We just got this co-packer. We just got something like that, like some value add down the line. And eventually, whenever you really need to close someone, I always instruct people to try to opt for as close to in person as you possibly can. In person is the best, without a doubt. But if not, you want to get someone on the phone or on a video call. The higher fidelity the communication can be, the better it is for you.
Well, I'm sure it also, I'm sure there's a level of trust that's played in that. You can, even though they can be fully aware of who you are and your character when you're communicating with someone you can't see face to face, there is a level of,
for sure.
It just seems riskier because you have no idea who you're communicating with, and on like a very personal level. And on top of that, I'm sure excitement plays a big factor, right? If I'm talking to you in person and I can see how passionate, how excited you are about this, you're like, Lucas, like this is a massive opportunity and I want you to be a part of this. That, it means a lot, right? So I totally understand.
Absolutely. It sells really well. And to add to the follow-up piece too, you want to, during a fundraising cycle, you want to make sure you're talking to as many people as possible, because one of the most golden follow-ups that pushes people down the funnel is seeing someone else investing, someone else who has a lot.
To be the first.
Exactly. Someone who has a lot of clout. So I've shared this with you, but our largest individual investor is the president of TikTok. And I remember my follow-ups after he got involved. It was like, okay, I'm in for 50 or 100 or something along those lines.
What would you say? Like, hey, by the way, John is in, or his name? I probably should know this since it's my main platform.
Blake Chandley. Yeah, it would be like Blake Chanley, the president of TikTok, is in, and there's 25K of the round left, or 50K of the round left, or whatever small allotment. Because previously my follow-ups would have been like, hey, we just got this update, there's X amount of the round left. But if you show like, damn, this kid just raised 70% of his round in 14 days, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he's got all of these other people interested, it pushes people down the funnel and it closes really quickly.
I wonder if there's a way to play that even further.
There is.
I wonder if like let's say you get your first piece from someone, then you hit somebody else up after you've already raised that, and you say like, hey, we're starting this round, do you want to be a part of it? And then 3-4 days later, you hit it up again. By the way, this person just invested, even though they were already there from the start. I wonder if that can have an impact on
this mechanistic stuff you're talking about, the tactical stuff. Abso-fucking-lutely. Like my last round, when is this airing? Because I have some news.
Probably like a while.
Okay,
I got a few backed up.
Okay, cool.
Like at least like a month or a month and a half.
Well, by the time this comes out, our venture deal will be wrapped up. And whenever I was approaching my last fundraise, what I did tactically is I got my high profile investors to reinvest. And they didn't have the largest investment sizes. So if my typical minimum investment size is like $100,000, but I wanted to get my previous investors to reinvest, you waive their check sizes. You want to show everyone these guys are committed. And of course, they have to want to invest again to be committed. But it changes the dynamics of the conversation entirely whenever, before I reached out to anyone, I told everyone, the president of TikTok, Torchy's Tacos, Siete Foods, founders of Athletic Brewing, they've all reinvested in this round. And
how do you do that? How do you ask someone for more money?
Yeah, you tell them your strategy. That's how, and that's what I did with all those people mentioned. I just told them having you involved and reinvested is such a positive signal for Bawi's growth, and it's absolutely going to help us raise at more favorable terms for you and for us, right? Because it's on the same cap table.
That's genius, bro. It's brilliant. How do you come up with that sort of strategy? Did you have a mentor figure? Did you see somebody else advise you to do that? I would have never thought of that until now, until you're saying it.
Yeah, I mean, talking to other founders and operators is really helpful, figuring out how they skin the cat. I adopted this strategy from one of my friends who helped start Barcode. It's the electrolyte Gatorade-like drink, and he approached fundraising in a pretty similar light. So what's really interesting too is my strategy before then was wildly different, and it was literally after a conversation I had with him, I was like, oh my god, I can definitely do that. I'm certain I can get these guys to reinvest. Like, everything's moving forward, and I trust my ability. I trust in myself to get these people to reinvest. So I just kept my ears super tuned to different fundraising strategies, and as soon as I found the winning one, you pursue it like a fucking dog and you see if it works.
How many rounds have you done to date?
Ooh, technically 4.
Wow.
But
over the course of when was the first one again? 2019?
2021 or 2022, I believe. But I would consider I guess legally speaking, there's like 4 rounds, but in actuality, I would consider everything before this venture round we took is just pre-seed, and it's been strung along incrementally as we needed it. But now this is like the first proper seed round.
And are you allowed to talk about how much you got at each round?
I'm honestly not super sure, but I can definitely share some ranges. So prior, I think I could share the initial bit of funding. Prior to this seed round, we had raised like over $1 million lifetime. And after this seed round, which I think this is going to be public knowledge soon, we're raising 2 million. We've raised 2 mil. So lifetime, it's in that like 3.5-ish range.
And how do you balance how much time, how much energy? Yeah, let's say time. How do you balance how much time, how many hours, minutes in your day you use to grow the company, focusing on sales, new distribution networks versus getting new investors?
That is like the trickiest piece, because there's stuff that I have to do, I guess, is like more of the face of the brand, the person who's like fundraising, that gets in the way of operating the actual business. Because as other entrepreneurs listening will resonate with, there are times where you got to fundraise full time. You have to, like, it'll
your
be
partner's just doing all the operations.
Yeah, exactly. Operations and sales. And that's not to say I'm not working for Bawi. I'm doing plenty, mainly within marketing and finance. So division of labor is essentially I'm in marketing and finance and Jordan is in sales and operations. And we both oversee both of these buckets. But
That's interesting that you split up marketing and sales.
yeah,
It's kind of very similar.
what's interesting, usually the CPG co-founder relationships, you'll see a co-founder that does operations and finance. So those will be their two skills. And then sales and marketing will be off the side. You could have a co-founder that just specializes in sales or just specializes in marketing, or does an amalgamation of the both. But yeah, finance and operations within CPG just need to live so close together because, as you know, like, super expensive business, you got a lot of cash to manage and you can easily squander away millions of dollars. And there's a graveyard of companies who have done that. They've raised $100 million and then have to take like a down round a few years later.
Yeah, you're all stoked. You're like, I just got 10 million. And then you talk to your partner and they're like, I need more. You're like, where did it all go?
Yeah, exactly. So right now we're at a stage where the business has to be professionalized. So we have to bring in people to bring in a lot of like financial controls. What does your reporting structure look like? When are you running sales forecasts, inventory forecasts? How does this fold into our overall operating model? Becoming more like management heavy because you need bureaucratic controls so you don't squander and mismanage your capital. So that's literally what we're in the throes of right now. So working with like project management, automation experts, seeing how they can make our Asana workflows like better at Bawi, and making sure all of our team members have some very clear roles and responsibilities, because for a while when you're a startup, you're cowboys. You're doing everything.
Yeah. Well, so, okay. I really like how you brought that up, because one thing that I think would be extremely valuable to everyone listening or watching is, how do you figure out how to do that? And I'm going to dumb that question down a little bit. I remember when I was first starting my business, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like, I had great ideas. I wanted to make something. I wanted to sell it. And, it sounded really fun. But everything you just said, I understand now. But, 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe to 90% of the people listening, that probably just flew way over their head. And they're like, how do you even learn how to do that?
Yeah.
How did you learn how to do that? Was it all just trial and error?
I would say two things in particular. Number one, have a co-founder that's just as invested in the business and mission as you, that has a complementary set of skills. So legitimately, I can say this with no qualms, this wouldn't exist without Jordan, and this wouldn't exist without me either. We needed each other.
And you need to both feel that way. That's extremely
important. 100%, to make it happen. And you have to have, a fire under your ass to professionalize the business like as soon as possible. But for a more pointed answer of your question, you need to figure out what best in class X looks like for your category. So a concrete example of this is, I want to network with the best people in beverage finance. Who would I talk to? Okay, I see I'm connected with the former CFO of Pepsi. He later went on to become an investor. I see what best in class financial reporting looks like from him, or now our CFO was Olipop's former CFO. We just brought him on this past
No
month.
way, congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. And asking him, okay, what does best in class reporting look like? If you have 10 of those conversations among people within beverage finance, you're going to get a lay of the land on what you should be considering. What are the key performance indicators you should be looking at? And you can rinse and repeat that for any industry. So if I was going to do something after this, which I definitely will, I would network with all of the experts within the industry. So if that's like, for me, if I was going for fashion, for example, okay, I see that the chief brand officer for the North Face was a UT Austin grad. I'm going to figure out what stellar branding looks like for fashion houses. And there's ways you can do that, but you just have to network and you got a cold email because there's no book on CPG finance or marketing. Like the level of information you need to execute is not found in a book because there's no way in shit that book is going to be up to date anyway.
There's a million different ways to do everything. So I think it's great that you're trying to find the person who's the best at whatever it is you're trying to do for your niche.
Yeah. And you're not even going to copy and paste, their operating procedures. You're picking bits and pieces, off of it to integrate into your thing. And it's like laborious, but that's how you make these best in class systems. Sure. And that's where I realized like my superpower is in networking with all these subject matter experts to elevate Bawi and the rest of the team. Like, okay, we need to get better at sales forecasting or inventory planning. Let me see who I can reach out to, like within my network, and see how I could integrate them properly, or hop on a call with them, or run this forecast by them, something along those lines. But
what does that process look like to you? I guess let me give some background first. I remember a few years ago, Gymshark, obviously. I remember hearing Ben Francis was stepping down as CEO, and they were letting someone new come in to, kind of lead the charge. And to a lot of people, they'd probably hate the idea of that. Someone is coming into my company and telling me what to do. That's why I started this thing, so I could be my own boss. But it's so valuable. But it has to be done the right way. You have to know how to pick the right person that isn't going to want to come in and take over full control. Sure. What is your process for, number one, finding the right person you need, and as well as that, how do you poach the right people from other companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Candidly, you have to talk to a lot of people and build the relationships over time. There's a lot of very clouded C-suite level executives that have wanted to work for Bawi for a while, over a year. One person in particular I've wanted to poach for a while. Timing's not perfect, but nonetheless, you build these relationships. And if you're doing something genuinely exciting and interesting to these folks that can make a material impact in your business, eventually they'll reach out to you and they're going to want to play ball at some point. And that's what happened with some of these people who are going to be like our Series A level hires down the line and really take the business from like a 5 mil run rate to a 50, like whenever we get to that point. But about vetting, what does that person look like? Is this a good fit for us? That's going to be just really up to your relationship with that person and how they can resolve your business needs, which you're going to have a really clear view on that whenever you're hiring. Like if operations for whatever reason are lacking, if you peek under the hood, you can see, oh shit, our accounts payable and accounts receivable process sucks. We're like paying our whatever supplier late. And then you talk to your prospective COO and you ask them, what's the type of redundancy you use within your procurement process? Something along those lines. And you'll be able to tell pretty quickly. And especially after you build like a round table that you can ping these questions off of or toss a resume to, you're not making the decisions in a vacuum anymore. Like And you shouldn't be making the decisions in a vacuum too, especially if this is like your first clothing brand, my first beverage brand. There's a point where we need like outside opinions.
For sure.
You just have to, make sure you got the right people around you.
Yeah, I think I have a very good bullshit radar, or bullshit detector, whatever you want to call it. And that's from being pushed out of companies myself, having to push other people out, being around a lot of shady individuals,
For sure.
meeting a lot of shady individuals. But I like what you just said at the beginning there. You're like, if your thing is exciting enough, the people are going to want to come to you.
For sure.
How did those other individuals that you're kind of touching on, you don't have to say names or whatever, but how do you think those people started to hear about Bawi? You just making small rumbles and
a lot of rumbles, some cold emails for sure. I did have a little foray on social media. I guess everyone considers LinkedIn a social network now, but I had a post go mini viral whenever Bawi got started several years ago, and so many people reached out to me, out of the woodwork. One gentleman in particular, I guess actually 3 people that reached out to me from that post later went on to become investors, and they were some of the most clouded.
From one post.
Yeah.
Wow. What was the post? What was so?
It was just a launch post, and I was talking about how important it is for Latinos to have better for you beverages, how excited I am, how thankful I am for our early investors, with some gorgeous creative direction on the post too, because at that time we had worked with best in class, agency to polish all of our creative behind it. It was just sexy enough to...
Can you send me that after? I want to check that out.
Oh, for sure.
Exciting.
Yeah, no doubt. To garner some like wide appeal. So a lot of them came from there. But aside from that, if I saw someone was connected with someone I wanted to reach out to, so prime example of this, there was I think that, the CFO of Pepsi was connected to some random person I met here in Austin. And I legitimately just asked like, hey, could you send this his way? Just like or give me his address to send him a 12-pack. And that's all I would do, to build a relationship. Same shit, as the same way I approach my fundraising, I approach networking with people.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. And I'm excited to check that one out. I think that's an excellent point. If you put yourself in the position where people have to come to you and they want to come to you, that's ultimately the best position to be in.
Totally.
And I'm still trying to figure that out myself. Once again, another great part of social media. LinkedIn is something that I seriously lack on. I'm kind of like the anti-LinkedIn, and I haven't touched it in like a year probably.
Oh, it's a dark horse apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk. We're kind of wrapping it up here at the end now, because this has been an unreal conversation. Time's just flying by. But I'd love to get into sales a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you can't grow a business without sales. And we've been talking about the bigger parts that come later down the line. But I'm sure people out there would love to know, after you create your product, which we talked about at the beginning a little bit, how did you go about selling it? The farmer's market was first.
Yeah.
At then what point do you start going into grocery stores one at a time, pitching it to them? How do you sell that at the beginning?
Yeah, thankfully, Jordan, he cut his teeth within consumer goods sales. So he was working for an oat bar brand remotely. So he basically ran their like Central Texas division. If I'm butchering this, I apologize, but he was running sales over there, and he learned a lot about the selling process. So he made relationships with every independent retailer within Austin. He knew the grocers by name. He had so many connections, already.
Huge.
With people that were familiar with him. So the selling process was like a lot easier because he knew these people by their first name, in a lot of situations too. So speaking to, I guess, the traditional CPG selling process, you would usually start within like independents, like indies, so to speak. So within Austin, that would be like your Royal Blue or your Tom's Market, and then move on to smaller but more co-ops is the right word for it. You'd move into co-ops or stores with like slightly larger footprints, and from there you would start trying to talk to larger retailers about doing very limited local placements, because brands get in trouble all the time by being like, okay, GB, we'll get into 1,000 stores. Like we'll do that, but you need to step ladder, your sales process up. You can't just hook a big fish and expect to meet HEB's $1 million PO.
And if you screw that up, that's devastating.
Yeah, 100%. And even if you do everything right, something's going to go wrong. And if you don't have the cash to dig yourself out of that hole, you're fucked. So you have to start small, independents, slightly larger grocery stores. And this also depends on your specific go-to-market strategy. So what stores work well for your product, right? So if I was doing an oat bar, I would probably tackle that differently than an agua fresca.
Nice. Well, dude, that sounds pretty much exactly like what the last guest I had on last week in the room across over there said. He said most companies die from indigestion, not starvation. So growing too fast. And it literally happened to my company a couple months ago.
Yeah.
We got a new sales channel. We got on TikTok Shop right when it launched. We're one of the best brands on there. Sales skyrocketed. All of a sudden, I'm out of stock for 2 months.
For sure.
And, I don't know if there was a way we could have planned for that because it was such a random type of event. But I
control that algorithm.
And control the algorithm. I guess you're right. Dude, well, extremely valuable. So thank you for that.
Of course.
My final question for you, actually, I have two. One of them is something I ask every single guest I have on. It's meant to be challenging. So, feel free to take as much time as you want to answer it. But what is one thing that you hold to be true that everybody else would certainly disagree with?
I hold to be true. I don't think everyone would disagree with this, but I don't think everyone would disagree with it. But something that I've tried preaching is you have to practice being the person you want to be. Like that's how I completely approach my self-development, and that goes into everything. Like that goes into my business relationships. Like if I'm being a little too catty one day, I have to look at myself in the mirror and be like, dude, you got to practice not being a dick sometimes. Same thing with relationships as well. It's like, okay, I want you to be a better boyfriend to your girlfriend. What does that look like? And it can get very detailed too, down to okay, I'm exhausted at 6 a.m, but I really want to create healthier habits, a healthier lifestyle. I got to put in the reps actively. And whenever you're I guess a younger person that's developing, you have a lot of potential to change your ways. And I have so much hope. Even in my moments of despair, which there have been plenty, I just have such an abundance of hope that I can change my reality by legitimately just shaping myself in these small interactions and ideally impacting my personality. So this is honestly a prime example too. I've had so many situations, whether they're interviews or meeting investors or girls or whatever, where I'm oh man, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little lightheaded before this. And then I return to who do you want to be, boss?
I'm practicing getting better at this.
Yeah, 100%.
And there is no way to skip that part of the process too. It's impossible.
You can't. You got to put the fucking reps in. There's no magic pill. It's okay, you want to have plenty of options whenever you're dating. All right, you got to get used to talking to a lot of people, man. And you got to get used to people telling you to fuck off. Yeah, it's just, there's no workarounds.
Dude, I fucking love that. And you know what? I'm going to let you know ahead of time right now so you don't get mad. Don't be upset if you see that on a TikTok. In the next couple of days. Practice being the person you want to be. I like that a lot. I think that's great. Hell yeah, man. And then to finish it off, I think because your story is so inspiring and you're young, you're killing it already once again. I'm very excited to see where you go. And I hope that 10 years from now, you have this insane exit and you're worth over $100 million, and everyone who wants to know the story can come back and watch this episode And the first thing that some kid out in the middle of nowhere, underprivileged with no resources, is going to be wondering is, can I do that too? So the final question is, can anyone do this? And, I think obviously the mindset comes first. You would agree. What do you have to tell yourself to be able to
Yeah,
get on the same path you're on?
for sure. You have to be incredibly patient. Patience will be your strongest virtue. You're gonna have to recruit. If you would have asked me when I was 13 years old, Victor, when are you gonna make your first business and make your first million? Different ambitions back then, by the way. As
Every
a
entrepreneur
teenager.
just wants to be rich at the beginning.
For sure, yeah. I was like, I want to help my parents out and buy like a Murcielago and shit like that. But yeah, I would say everything took so much longer than I thought it would. And it took so much more effort than I thought it would. So having the understanding that you are going to have to wait a really long time to fill the shoes you want to is the thing you got to keep in mind. Because I really thought, whenever we were starting Bawi, and Jordan will quote me on this, typically food and beverage companies have about a 5-year timeline after they launch where they'll have an exit opportunity if they perform well within market. And I remember telling Jordan in 2019, like, by 2024, man, this thing's going to be a fucking behemoth. Like, it's going to be huge. Lo and behold, it's 2024. And I'm just now in the place I thought I would be back when I was 21 or 20, but I'm stoked, dude. It's worth it. Like, if you put the time in and you're patient, it's going to be worth it. And especially when you hold on to a concept that you're incredibly passionate and invigorated about, that you think also has some pretty solid business fundamentals, like, you pursue it like a dog, and you just have to develop like thick skin. And again, like, I've had some pretty fucking horrible days, weeks, months, even, the past several years, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I'm going to wake up the next morning anyway, and I'm going to have an opportunity to change, somewhat. So just try to cultivate unbridled optimism and patience.
Fuck yeah. Well, dude, yeah, perfectly said. I'm excited to get you back on for round 2, and I don't know. Hopefully, we'll plan for a round 2 once you get that exit, and then I'd love to hear your change on everything, your perspective change. So,
No
dude,
doubt.
Victor, thank you so much for coming on, bro.
For sure, bro.
I really appreciate it. And you killed the interview too. You're very well spoken, man. So that was great. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to tag all of his stuff, link his socials if you want to hit him up. Maybe this is the push you need to start your personal brand. If this episode launches, and I hope it does, then it's going to give a little bit of fire, and you can start spreading it if you want.
Sure. Well, our social media manager wants me to make a day in the life post today. So
there you go.
We're on it.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you guys again for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you guys in the next one.